January 8, 1945, 2300 hours. The palace at Versailles is quiet in the way only command centers get at 11 at night. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, deliberate, like the building itself is holding its breath. Dwight Eisenhower sits alone in his office. He's 54 years old, but tonight he looks older. The desk lamp throws harsh shadows across his face. An ashtray overflows with cigarette butts. 4 empty coffee cups sit in a row like soldiers at attention. In front of him, 1 piece of paper and 1 telephone message. The paper is a draft termination order, typed, official. It relieves Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery of command. The signature line is blank, waiting for Eisenhower's pen. The telephone message came 20 minutes ago. Major General Freddie de Guingand is with Montgomery now, trying to force an apology, trying to prevent the collapse that's coming if Montgomery refuses. Another message sits beside it, from Bradley, delivered 2 hours ago. The words were clear. If Montgomery doesn't apologize by 0800 tomorrow, you'll have my resignation letter on your desk. Eisenhower has been staring at these documents for 3 hours. He lights another cigarette. His hands are steady. They're always steady. But inside, he's calculating futures that all end badly. If Montgomery refuses to apologize, Bradley resigns at dawn. When Bradley goes, Patton goes. When those two go, 10 more American generals follow. The entire command structure collapses like a house of cards. If Eisenhower fires Montgomery before the apology comes, Churchill withdraws British cooperation. The alliance fractures. The war in Europe grinds to chaos. If Montgomery apologizes, but Eisenhower doesn't punish him, Bradley resigns anyway. The insult to American troops goes unanswered. American morale collapses. He has 9 hours until dawn. 9 hours to prevent total disaster. This isn't how victory is supposed to feel. The clock on the wall ticks forward. 2,304 hours. 8 hours and 56 minutes until Bradley's deadline. Context: 48 hours earlier. 48 hours ago, everything was manageable. Difficult, yes. Complicated, absolutely. But manageable. The Battle of the Bulge had just ended. Hitler's final desperate offensive in the Ardennes forest. The Germans had punched through American lines in mid-December, creating chaos across an 80-mile front. For 2 weeks, the outcome hung in doubt. Thousands of American soldiers died in those woods, each one somebody's son, somebody's husband, somebody's father, who kissed his family goodbye and promised to come home when this was over. They kept that promise in metal caskets. The fighting in the Ardennes had split the American front in 2. The German offensive drove a wedge deep into Allied positions. Bradley's headquarters was south of the Bulge. Montgomery's headquarters was north. Basic geography made coordination nearly impossible. Eisenhower had made a practical decision. Temporary, purely operational. He placed 2 American armies under Montgomery's command for the duration of the crisis. First Army, commanded by General Courtney Hodges, 200,000 men. 9th Army, commanded by General William Simpson, 300,000 men. 500,000 American soldiers, temporarily reporting to a British field marshal. The arrangement worked. Montgomery coordinated the northern defense, while Bradley handled the south. Patton's 3rd Army wheeled 90 degrees in a blizzard and smashed into the German flank, relieving the encircled garrison at Bastogne. The German offensive stalled, then collapsed. By early January, the crisis had passed. 1st Army and 9th Army were supposed to return to American command. Supposed to. That was the agreement. But then came January 7th. At a military hospital near the Ardennes, a 19-year-old soldier from the 101st Airborne lies in a bed recovering from frostbite. He spent 7 days surrounded at Bastogne. 7 days in a frozen hole in the ground. Temperature 20 degrees below zero. 1 blanket. Half rations. Artillery shells screaming overhead day and night. On December 26th, he heard engines. American engines. The distinctive sound of Sherman tanks. Patton's 3rd Army had arrived. The siege was broken. This soldier will go home after the war. He'll marry, have children, live a full life. He's one of the lucky ones. Tomorrow, he'll read in Stars and Stripes that a British field marshal claims he saved the American forces at Bastogne, claims American troops were disorganized, claims British leadership rescued them. This soldier will remember those 7 days in the frozen hole. Remember his friends who didn't make it out. Remember that Montgomery was 100 miles away, warm and safe at headquarters. He'll be angry. He'll write a letter to his congressman. But that's still 24 hours away. Characters: 4 men, 4 philosophies. To understand what's about to happen, you need to understand these 4 men. Not their ranks or their ribbons, their beliefs. The fundamental assumptions about war and leadership that shaped every decision they made. Dwight Eisenhower believed in consensus, in holding things together. He'd spent 3 years as Supreme Allied Commander, and those 3 years had taught him one brutal lesson. Winning battles is easier than maintaining alliances. The British want Berlin, the French want Paris, the Americans want to go home, the Soviets want everything. Every decision is a negotiation between competing interests and fragile egos. Eisenhower's job isn't to be the best general, it's to keep everyone in the war long enough to finish it. He's a political general in the best sense of that term. He understands that wars are won by coalitions, and coalitions require compromise. Sometimes the compromise tastes like failure. Sometimes it feels like betrayal. But the alternative is fighting alone, and fighting alone is how you lose. Tonight, in his office at Versailles, that philosophy is being tested to destruction. Bernard Montgomery is 57 years old, thin, precise, utterly convinced of his own brilliance. He believes war is won through systems, through meticulous planning and overwhelming preparation, through getting every detail exactly right before the first shot is fired. This belief comes from experience. Montgomery fought in the First World War. He saw what happened when generals sent men forward without proper preparation. He watched waves of British soldiers walk into machine gun fire because someone decided courage could substitute for artillery and intelligence. 60,000 casualties on the first day of the Somme. Montgomery learned the lesson every British officer learned. Improvisation gets people killed. Planning keeps them alive. By 1945, that lesson has calcified into dogma. Montgomery doesn't just prefer careful planning, he requires it, demands it. Any operation that doesn't meet his standards of preparation is reckless, amateurish, American. September 1944. Operation Market Garden. Montgomery's plan to end the war by Christmas. Drop paratroopers to capture 5 bridges across the Netherlands. Rush armored columns up a single highway. Cross the Rhine. Drive into Germany's industrial heartland. Win the war. Eisenhower gave him priority. Supplies, air support, everything Montgomery requested. The operation failed catastrophically. 17,000 casualties. Paratroopers trapped at Arnhem, surrounded and destroyed. The farthest bridge, the critical bridge, stayed in German hands. Montgomery's response: 90% successful. 90% successful. 17,000 men dead or captured, and Montgomery called it 90% successful. He wasn't punished, wasn't relieved, wasn't even reprimanded. The alliance needed British leadership to have credibility, so Montgomery kept his command, kept his rank, and kept his conviction that he was right and everyone else was wrong. Now, 4 months later, he's about to make the same mistake. But this time, the cost won't be measured in casualties. It'll be measured in broken alliances and shattered trust. Omar Bradley is 51. Quiet, methodical. The GI's general. Soldiers love him because he cares about them. Not in some abstract, patriotic way. He actually cares. He reads casualty reports and sees names, not numbers. Bradley commanded 1st Army and 9th Army through Normandy. He built those formations from the ground up, trained them, led them across France. Those are his armies, his men. When Eisenhower temporarily placed them under Montgomery for the Bulge, Bradley accepted it because the operational situation demanded it, temporarily. That word matters to Bradley. It's not just military terminology, it's a promise, a commitment that once the crisis passes, his armies come back. For Bradley, this isn't about ego, it's about honor. The men who died in the Ardennes died under his command. They were his responsibility. Their sacrifice belongs to them, not to some British field marshal who showed up after the fighting was mostly over. If Montgomery takes credit for American blood, Bradley can't accept it, won't accept it. There are principles that matter more than careers, and honoring the dead is one of them. George Patton is 59, profane, brilliant, absolutely convinced that wars are won by speed and audacity, not by careful planning. Patton believes in the warrior spirit, in attacking before the enemy is ready, in moving so fast that mistakes don't matter because you're already past them before they can cause problems. December 22nd, 1944. Bastogne is surrounded. The 101st Airborne is running out of ammunition, running out of food, running out of time. They need relief, and they need it now. Patton turns Third Army 90 degrees in the middle of a blizzard. 3 full divisions, 150,000 men, swinging from eastward advance to northward attack. It's a maneuver that's supposed to take weeks. Patton does it in 72 hours. His columns march through the night. Tanks slip off icy roads. Trucks break down in snowdrifts. Men freeze to death during the approach march before they even reach the enemy. Patton doesn't care about the cost. He cares about speed. And on December 26th, his lead elements smash through German lines and relieve Bastogne. The 101st Airborne is saved. 400 men died in that approach march. 400 casualties before the battle even started. Patton considers it a bargain, because the alternative was letting Bastogne fall, and Bastogne was worth any price. Montgomery heard about Patton's relief of Bastogne and called it typical American recklessness. Patton heard that Montgomery was taking credit for the victory and called it something considerably less polite. Now these two men, these two philosophies, are heading for collision, and Eisenhower is standing in the middle, trying to prevent the crash from destroying everything. The bulge. What actually happened? Before we get to what Montgomery said, we need to understand what actually happened, because the truth matters, especially when someone's about to lie about it. December 16th, 1944, 0530 hours. The German offensive begins. 20 divisions hit 6 American divisions across the Ardennes. It's Hitler's last gamble. He scraped together his final reserves, his last tanks, his last trained soldiers. If this offensive fails, Germany has nothing left. The attack achieves complete surprise. American positions collapse, whole regiments are overrun in the first hours. The front line doesn't hold, it shatters. But shattering isn't the same as breaking. Individual American units fight where they stand. They don't have orders, don't have support, don't have any reasonable hope of survival. They fight anyway. They hold crossroads and small towns because someone needs to slow the German advance, and they're the ones who are there. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne digs in. They're surrounded on December 20th. A German officer arrives under a white flag with a surrender demand. The American commander, General Anthony McAuliffe, sends back a one-word response: nuts. The 101st Airborne holds Bastogne for 6 days. No resupply, no reinforcements, just riflemen and snow, and the absolute certainty that they're not surrendering. Montgomery isn't there. He's 100 miles north at his headquarters in Belgium. He's coordinating the defense, yes, moving units, adjusting boundaries, doing exactly what a field marshal is supposed to do from a headquarters. But he isn't at Bastogne, isn't in the Ardennes forest, isn't anywhere near the actual fighting. The soldiers dying in those woods are Americans. The units holding the line are American. The generals making battlefield decisions are American. Montgomery's contribution is real. Coordination matters. Unity of command matters. But coordination isn't the same as combat. And Montgomery is about to claim credit for combat he didn't participate in. The press conference, January 7th, 1945. The press conference starts at 1100 hours. 50 reporters, American, British, Canadian, photographers, newsreel cameras. This is Montgomery's chance to explain the victory at the Bulge to the world. It should be simple. Thank the soldiers who fought. Acknowledge the sacrifice. express confidence in the Allied advance into Germany. Standard stuff. Montgomery doesn't do standard. He steps to the podium, thin, precise, utterly confident. The cameras roll. The battle has been most interesting. I think possibly one of the most interesting and tricky battles I have ever handled. One of the most interesting battles I have ever handled. Not we handled, not the Allies handled, I handled. He continues. As soon as I saw what was happening, I took certain steps myself to ensure that, if the Germans got to the Meuse, they would certainly not get over that river. Certain steps myself. Montgomery is erasing everyone else from the story. The American units that actually held the line, the American generals who coordinated the defense, even Eisenhower, who made the decision to unify command. None of them exist in Montgomery's version. There's only Montgomery, seeing the danger, taking action, saving the day. One reporter, American, shifts uncomfortably. He was at Bastogne. He saw the 101st Airborne holding that town with nothing but rifles and determination. Montgomery wasn't there. Montgomery keeps talking. The American forces had become somewhat disorganized. Therefore, I said to my staff, we must tidy up the show. Disorganized. That's the word he chooses. Not under heavy attack. Not fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. Disorganized. As if American units fell apart and needed British leadership to put them back together. I employed the whole available power of the British group of armies. You have this picture of British troops fighting on both sides of American forces who had suffered a hard blow. This is a fine Allied picture. The American reporter in the back stops taking notes. He's heard enough. He knows what tomorrow's headlines will say. Montgomery concludes, the battle has been won. We can now look forward to complete victory in the West. The reporters file out. The British reporters think it was a fine summary. Montgomery defended the American troops while taking appropriate credit for British leadership. The American reporters know better. They heard what Montgomery actually said. They heard him claim he saved disorganized American forces. They heard him erase American sacrifice from the story. One reporter gets back to his hotel and starts typing. His story will run in tomorrow's New York Times. Twist number 1. Montgomery wasn't there. By midnight, the story is on wire services across the United States. But the American reporters add context that Montgomery didn't provide. The New York Times runs a map. It shows Montgomery's headquarters in Belgium. It shows Bastogne, where the 101st Airborne was surrounded. The distance between them, over 100 miles. The Chicago Tribune interviews soldiers from the 101st. They describe 7 days of being surrounded. No British troops came to their relief. No British commanders visited their positions. The relief came from Patton's Third Army, attacking from the south. Where was Montgomery during those 7 days? At his headquarters. Coordinating, yes. Planning, certainly. But not at Bastogne. Not in the Ardennes. Not anywhere near the soldiers he claims he saved. The press discovers something else. During the critical days of the battle, Montgomery made one visit to American headquarters. One. He spent most of his time at his own headquarters, receiving reports, issuing orders, maintaining what he called proper control. Proper control from 100 miles away, while American soldiers died in frozen holes. The American public reads these stories on January 8th. They read about Montgomery claiming he saved American forces. They read about the actual distances involved. They read interviews with soldiers who were there, and they get angry. Veterans organizations issue statements demanding an explanation. Congressmen receive letters from constituents asking why a British general is taking credit for American victories. Mothers who lost sons in the Ardennes write to newspapers asking if their boys died because American leadership was inadequate. The storm is building, and it's about to hit Eisenhower's headquarters with hurricane force. The reaction, January 8, 1945. The telephone on Bradley's desk rings at 0700 hours. He's been awake for an hour already. Coffee, reports, the usual morning routine. He picks up the receiver. It's his chief of staff. Sir, you need to see the morning papers. Bradley reads the New York Times first, then the Chicago Tribune, then the Washington Post. Each story is worse than the last. Montgomery saved American forces. Montgomery organized the defense. Montgomery won the battle, while American generals struggled to maintain control. Bradley sets down the last newspaper. His hands are completely still. His face shows nothing, but inside, something fundamental has broken. Those were his armies, 1st Army and 9th Army. He commanded them through Normandy, across France, into Germany. He built those formations, trained their staffs, knew their commanders personally. When the bulge happened, he'd handed them to Montgomery because the operational situation demanded it, with the understanding that once the crisis passed, they'd return. Montgomery just claimed permanent credit for their achievements. Thousands of American soldiers died in the Ardennes, men under Bradley's command. Their families are reading these newspapers right now, reading that their sons died because American forces were disorganized, because American leadership was inadequate. Bradley picks up his phone, calls Eisenhower directly. "Ike, have you seen the papers?" "I'm reading them now." "Then you know what I'm going to say." Eisenhower is quiet for a moment. Then, "Omar, don't do anything hasty." Hasty? Montgomery just told the world that American soldiers can't fight without British leadership. He's erased the sacrifice of men who died under my command, men I'm responsible for. I know what he said. Then you know what I have to do. If Montgomery doesn't apologize by tomorrow morning, you'll have my resignation letter on your desk. I will not serve under a command structure that allows this kind of insult. Omar, I'm done, Ike. I gave Montgomery those armies because you asked me to. I accepted it because the mission required it. But this? Bradley's voice is completely calm, utterly certain. This is beyond acceptance. Either Montgomery apologizes and those armies come back to my command, or I'm out. He hangs up. Eisenhower sits in his office, holding a dead telephone. He knows Bradley, knows him well enough to understand that this isn't bluster. Bradley means every word. If Bradley resigns, this gets worse. Much worse. The phone rings again. Patton. Ike, tell me you're firing that pompous son of a bitch. George, I just read what Montgomery said. I just read how he claimed credit for Bastogne, for my 3rd Army breaking through in a goddamn blizzard, for 400 of my men who froze to death on the approach march. Patton's voice drops, gets quieter, more dangerous. I turned an entire army 90 degrees in 72 hours. Do you know what that takes? The logistics? The coordination? The absolute refusal to accept that something is impossible. I know, George. Montgomery sat in his headquarters and moved pins on a map. I moved 150,000 men through a blizzard to save Bastogne, and he gets the credit. Silence. Then Patton delivers the ultimatum. If Bradley resigns, I resign with him. You'll have both our letters by end of day tomorrow. He hangs up. Eisenhower stares at the phone. 2 of his best generals. 2 of the men who've been with him since North Africa, both threatening resignation over Montgomery's ego. The phone rings a 3rd time. Churchill. Ike, we need to talk. I've seen the American newspapers. This is bad. That's an understatement, Winston. I'm calling to tell you that you cannot fire Montgomery over this. I understand Bradley's anger. God knows Montgomery was a fool. But if you fire a British field marshal because American newspapers are upset, my government will not survive it. Eisenhower closes his eyes. Winston, I have 2 American generals threatening to resign. If they go, others will follow. My entire command structure collapses. Then find another solution. Any solution. But don't fire Montgomery. The alliance cannot survive that. Churchill hangs up. Eisenhower sits alone in his office. The clock shows 0830 hours. He has less than 24 hours until Bradley's deadline. Fire Montgomery, and Britain withdraws cooperation. Don't punish Montgomery, and Bradley resigns. Either choice destroys the alliance. There has to be a 3rd option. There has to be something between total capitulation and total war. He picks up the phone, calls his chief of staff. Get me Major General de Guingond, Montgomery's chief of staff. Tell him I need to see him immediately. Tell him it's urgent. Yes, sir. Anything else? Yes. Draft a termination order for Montgomery. Leave the signature line blank. I want it ready in case I need it. Eisenhower hangs up, looks at the clock again. 23 hours until Bradley's deadline. 23 hours to save the alliance or watch it burn. Segment 1. The British Intervention. Major General Freddie de Guingand arrives at Supreme Headquarters at 1400 hours. He's Montgomery's Chief of Staff, the man who keeps Montgomery out of trouble through a combination of tact, timing, and sheer persistence. Today, he looks worried. He's shown into Eisenhower's office immediately. This isn't a scheduled visit. This is an emergency.
General Eisenhower, I came as soon as I received your message.
Thank you for coming, Freddie. We have a serious problem. I know. I've read the American newspapers. I've also spoken with Montgomery. He doesn't understand why the Americans are so upset. Eisenhower slides a folder across the desk. These are statements from American veterans organizations, letters from congressmen, telegrams from mothers who lost sons in the Bulge. They all say the same thing. Montgomery insulted American troops. He claimed credit for their sacrifice. He implied American leadership was inadequate. De Guingand reads through the documents. His face doesn't change, but his shoulders slump slightly. I was afraid of this. Bradley has given me until tomorrow morning. If Montgomery doesn't apologize, Bradley resigns. When Bradley goes, Patton goes. When those two go, the entire American command structure follows. De Guingand looks up sharply. That's not a threat. That's a guarantee. I know Bradley. He means it. Eisenhower opens his desk drawer, pulls out a single sheet of paper. The termination order for Montgomery. Typed. Official. Everything filled in except the signature line. De Guingand reads it, sets it down carefully. If you sign this, Montgomery's career is over. If I don't sign it, I lose every American general in this theater. The alliance collapses. The war in Europe falls into chaos. What do you need from me? I need Montgomery to apologize, publicly, by tomorrow morning. I need him to acknowledge that American forces bore the brunt of the fighting at the Bulge. I need him to show respect for American sacrifice. De Guingand nods slowly. And if he apologizes, what happens to First Army and Ninth Army? This is the real question, the one that matters. First Army returns to Bradley immediately. That's non-negotiable. Bradley gets his army back. And Ninth Army? Eisenhower pauses. This is the compromise he's been calculating all morning. Montgomery can keep Ninth Army for one operation, the Rhine crossing. After the Rhine is successfully crossed, Ninth Army also returns to American command. De Guingand's eyes narrow. One operation only. One operation, Operation Plunder, the assault across the Rhine. When that's complete, Ninth Army goes back to Bradley. No extensions, no arguments about operational necessity. It returns. Montgomery will argue that planning requires... I don't care what Montgomery argues. Those are the terms. First Army returns immediately. Ninth Army returns after the Rhine. That's the only deal that prevents me from signing this termination order. De Guingand looks at the termination order again, then at Eisenhower. I'll present these terms to him, but you need to understand something about Montgomery. He genuinely believes he's right. He thinks the press conference was accurate. He thinks American forces were disorganized, and he saved them. Then you need to make him understand that being right doesn't matter if it destroys the alliance. Make him understand that he apologizes or his career ends. Those are his only two choices. De Guingand stands. I'll be back before midnight. Make it before 2200 hours. I need time to notify Bradley if this works. After de Guingand leaves, Eisenhower sits alone. He's just made the first real decision. First Army returns to Bradley. Ninth Army stays with Montgomery for one operation only. It's a compromise. Bradley wanted both armies back immediately. Montgomery will want to keep both permanently. This solution gives each man half of what he wants. The question is whether either will accept it. Segment 2. Churchill's Revelation. At 1600 hours, the phone rings again. Churchill, for the second time today. Ike, I need to see you, face to face. I'm flying to Paris. I'll be there by 1900 hours. Winston, I'm in the middle of... I know what you're in the middle of. That's why I'm coming. There are things you need to understand, things I can only tell you in person. Churchill hangs up. 3 hours later, Winston Churchill walks into Eisenhower's office. He's 70 years old. He looks exhausted. The war has aged everyone, but Churchill looks carved from fatigue. He sits heavily, doesn't wait for pleasantries. I'm going to tell you something that cannot leave this room, something that will make you understand why I cannot let you fire Montgomery, no matter how richly he deserves it. Churchill pulls out a folder, opens it. Inside are casualty reports. British casualty reports. Do you know how many men Britain has lost in this war? 300,000, approximately. 380,000 dead, another 470,000 wounded. We started the war with a population of 47 million. We're running out of men, Ike. Literally running out. Twist number 2. Britain is exhausted. Churchill pushes the folder across the desk. The British Army in Western Europe is at 60% of authorized strength. 60%. We're cannibalizing units to keep other units operational. We're lowering physical standards for recruits, raising the conscription age, and we still can't fill the ranks. Eisenhower looks at the numbers. They're worse than he thought, much worse. Montgomery knows this, Churchill continues. He knows that British forces alone cannot conduct major offensive operations anymore. We don't have the manpower, don't have the reserves. If we take heavy casualties in a single battle, we might not be able to replace them. This explains something that's been puzzling Eisenhower. Montgomery's extreme caution, his insistence on overwhelming preparation, his refusal to accept any operation that might result in heavy losses. It's not just personality, it's mathematics. Britain can't afford another Somme, can't afford another Passchendaele. One more battle like that, and the British Army collapses from sheer lack of men. That's why he needs American forces, Eisenhower says quietly. Yes, for the Rhine crossing he needs 9th Army, 300,000 American soldiers, because without them he cannot guarantee success. And if the Rhine crossing fails, if British forces take heavy casualties attempting it without American support, we might not have enough men left to finish the war. Churchill leans forward. The cigar in his hand has gone out. He doesn't relight it. I'm not asking you to keep Montgomery in command of American forces permanently. I'm asking you to let him keep enough strength to conduct one more major operation. Let him cross the Rhine with 9th Army. Let Britain have one more victory that shows we still matter. Then transition everything back to American command. You're asking me to gamble that Montgomery won't find a way to keep 9th Army beyond the Rhine crossing. I'm asking you to trust that I'll make sure he doesn't. I'll handle Montgomery. You handle your generals. We get through the Rhine crossing together, then we finish this war with the alliance intact. Eisenhower looks at the casualty reports again. The numbers are devastating. Britain has been fighting since 1939. 6 years of war. And now, at the moment of victory, the country is so exhausted it can barely field an army. This is why Churchill called at 3 in the morning yesterday. This is why he's here in person tonight. Britain needs this, needs to be part of the final victory, needs to cross the Rhine as a major power, not as a spent force watching from the sidelines. First Army returns to Bradley immediately, Eisenhower says. That's firm. Agreed. 9th Army stays with Montgomery for the Rhine crossing only. After the Rhine is crossed, it returns to American command. No extensions, no operational necessity arguments. It returns. Agreed. And Montgomery apologizes, publicly, tonight. He will. Freddie is with him now. Montgomery will apologize. Eisenhower nods slowly. Then we have an understanding. Churchill stands, extends his hand. They shake. Thank you, Ike. I know this isn't what you wanted. None of this is what I wanted. But it might be what we need to hold this alliance together. After Churchill leaves, Eisenhower sits alone with the casualty reports. 380,000 British dead. An entire generation gone. And the survivors are so exhausted they can barely continue. No wonder Montgomery was desperate. No wonder Churchill intervened personally. Britain is fighting on fumes, and pride and the absolute refusal to quit before the job is done. But understanding doesn't change what happened. Montgomery insulted American troops. That can't be ignored.
The compromise keeps everyone in the war, but it satisfies no one. That's the nature of compromises. Everyone gives up something. Everyone walks away feeling diminished. Bradley gets 1st Army back, but loses 9th Army for now. Montgomery keeps 9th Army, but only for one operation. Churchill maintains British prestige, but has to watch Britain's military influence decline. Eisenhower holds the alliance together, but strains his relationships with his closest generals. Nobody wins. They just lose less than they might have. Segment 3. Montgomery's forced apology. De Guingand returns at 21:30 hours. He looks exhausted, the kind of exhausted that comes from arguing with someone who refuses to admit they're wrong. He'll apologize, but you're not going to like it. What does that mean? It means he's apologizing because I showed him the termination order, because I explained that his career ends if he doesn't, not because he thinks he did anything wrong. I don't care about his motivations. I care about the apology. You'll have it within the hour. He's drafting it now. The apology arrives at 2200 hours. It's brief, formal, completely devoid of actual contrition. I am sorry if my remarks at the press conference were misunderstood. I have the highest respect for American troops and American commanders. Any suggestion otherwise is most unfortunate. Sorry if remarks were misunderstood. Not sorry for what he said. Sorry that people misunderstood him. It's the kind of apology that makes things worse by pretending to make them better. But it's technically an apology. And technically is all Eisenhower needs right now. He calls Bradley immediately. Omar, Montgomery has apologized. There's a long silence on the other end. Read it to me. Eisenhower reads the statement. Another silence. That's not an apology. That's Montgomery saying we're too stupid to understand what he meant. I know, but it's what we're going to get. And I have something else. 1st Army returns to your command tomorrow, officially. Hodges will report to 12th Army Group as of 0800. And 9th Army? 9th Army stays with Montgomery for the Rhine crossing, one operation only. After the Rhine is crossed, it returns to you. I'm giving you my word, Omar. One operation, then it comes back. Bradley is quiet for a long time. You're asking me to trust Montgomery. I'm asking you to trust me. I've set clear boundaries, clear consequences. 1st Army returns tomorrow. 9th Army returns after the Rhine. If Montgomery tries to extend beyond that, I'll remove him myself. More silence. What about Patton? I'm calling him next, but I need to know you're staying, Omar. I need the command structure to hold. Bradley exhales slowly. I'm staying, for now. But Ike, I'm watching Montgomery. If he tries to keep 9th Army beyond the Rhine crossing, if he finds some excuse to delay the transfer, I'm done. And next time, there won't be a compromise. Understood. Thank you, Omar. Eisenhower hangs up, calls Patton immediately. George, Bradley's staying. Good for Bradley. I'm still writing my resignation. No, you're not. Listen to me. 1st Army returns to Bradley tomorrow. 9th Army returns after the Rhine crossing. Montgomery gets one operation. That's all. Patton is quiet, thinking. And you're giving Omar your word on this? I'm giving both of you my word. Montgomery gets Operation Plunder, the Rhine assault. After that's complete, 9th Army comes back to Bradley. Period. You know what I think, Ike? What? I think I'm going to cross the Rhine before Montgomery even starts his big operation. I think I'm going to prove that all his preparation and planning is a waste of time. Eisenhower allows himself a small smile. If you can do that, George, I'll be the first to congratulate you. Mark my words, I'll be across the Rhine while Montgomery is still counting his artillery shells. After the calls, Eisenhower sits back. The immediate crisis is over. Bradley is staying. Patton is staying. Montgomery has apologized, however insincerely. The alliance holds, barely. But Eisenhower knows this isn't really over, because he just made a bet. He's betting that Montgomery will actually return 9th Army after the Rhine crossing. That the word temporary will actually mean temporary. And he's remembering September 1944, Market Garden, when Montgomery was given priority, given resources, given everything he asked for, and delivered 90% success, which is to say, failure. Twist number 3, Bradley's ultimatum. January 9th, 1945, 0800 hours. Montgomery arrives at Supreme Headquarters for a formal meeting with Eisenhower. This is the first time they've spoken face-to-face since the press conference. Montgomery enters the office, stands at attention, formal, correct, showing no emotion whatsoever. "You asked to see me, General?" Eisenhower doesn't invite him to sit. "I'm returning First Army to General Bradley's command, effective immediately. General Hodges will report to 12th Army Group as of today." Montgomery's face doesn't change. "I understand. 9th Army will remain under your operational control for Operation Plunder, the assault across the Rhine. After the Rhine is successfully crossed, 9th Army will also return to General Bradley's command. For planning purposes, I'll need to know the exact date of transfer. You'll be informed when the operation is complete. That makes long-term operational planning rather difficult." Eisenhower's voice hardens, just slightly, just enough. "Bernard, let me be very clear. 9th Army is yours for one specific operation. When that operation concludes, the Army returns to American command. There will be no extensions. No operational necessity arguments. No requests for just one more operation. Do you understand?" Montgomery stiffens. "I was simply asking for clarity on—" "You have clarity. 9th Army returns after the Rhine crossing. That's the only clarity you're going to get." For the first time, something flickers across Montgomery's face. Not quite anger, not quite fear, something in between. The realization that he's being put on notice. "Is there anything else?" Montgomery asks. "Yes. Don't ever speak about American casualties the way you did at that press conference. Not ever again. Those men died under my command, under Bradley's command, under Patton's command. They didn't die so you could claim credit for saving them." Montgomery's jaw tightens. "My intent was never to—" "Your intent doesn't matter. The result matters. You insulted American dead and the generals who led them. You almost destroyed this alliance. If you do it again, I won't compromise. I'll fire you. Churchill won't be able to stop me. Do you understand?" Silence. "Do you understand, Field Marshal?" "I understand." "Good. Dismissed." Montgomery salutes, turns, walks out. The door closes. Eisenhower sits down. His hands are shaking slightly, not from anger, from the sheer weight of what just happened. He threatened to fire a British field marshal, told him directly and unambiguously that one more mistake ends his career. He just drew a line and dared Montgomery to cross it. Churchill will hear about this conversation within hours, probably already has. De Guingand was likely waiting outside to debrief Montgomery the moment he left. But it needed to be said. Montgomery needed to understand that this wasn't a negotiation where both sides give a little. This was Eisenhower drawing a boundary and making clear what happens if it's crossed. The question now is whether Montgomery will respect that boundary, whether he'll actually return 9th Army after the Rhine crossing, whether he'll accept reduced authority gracefully or fight for every scrap of command. Churchill's bitter pill. January 17th, 1945. First Army officially returns to Bradley's command. The transfer happens quietly. No ceremony, no press releases, just operational orders moving 200,000 men back under American control. Bradley receives General Hodges at 12th Army Group headquarters. They shake hands. Neither man smiles. This should have happened weeks ago, should have been automatic once the Bulge crisis passed. "Welcome back, Courtney." "Good to be back, sir." That's all either man says about it. But the relief is palpable. First Army is home. The command structure makes sense again. Except for 9th Army, still with Montgomery, still waiting for the Rhine crossing that will determine whether Eisenhower's compromise was wisdom or weakness. Twist number 4. Churchill admits Britain is the junior partner. January 18th, 1945. Winston Churchill stands before the House of Commons. The chamber is packed. Everyone knows what's coming. The American press has been brutal. British newspapers have been defensive. The alliance is strained and Parliament wants answers. Churchill is 70 years old. He's given thousands of speeches, rallied Britain through the Blitz, convinced America to enter the war, held the coalition together through crisis after crisis. This might be the hardest speech he's ever had to give. Because this speech isn't about rallying, isn't about inspiration. This speech is about admitting a truth that Britain has been avoiding for 2 years. The war has changed. Britain's role has changed. And no amount of rhetoric can hide it anymore. Churchill rises. The chamber falls silent. I have seen the American newspapers published in the wake of Field Marshal Montgomery's press conference. I understand the anger. I share the concern. He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. It is important that we, as Britain, as the British people, understand the reality of this war, understand who is bearing the burden, who is making the sacrifice. Another pause, longer this time. In the Battle of the Bulge, American forces bore the brunt of the fighting. American soldiers held the line. American casualties numbered in the tens of thousands. British forces played a supporting role, an important role, yes, but supporting nonetheless. The chamber is absolutely silent. Members of Parliament shift uncomfortably. This isn't the Churchill they're used to hearing. We must face facts. American troops have done almost all the fighting in Western Europe since D-Day. American forces have suffered almost all the losses. The material contribution of the United States to this war effort dwarfs our own. He says it plainly, without embellishment. The simple, devastating truth. Britain is the junior partner now. This does not diminish British valor, does not erase British sacrifice. Our men have fought with courage and determination for 6 years. But we must acknowledge reality. We must recognize the scale of the American contribution. We must show proper gratitude and respect. Churchill sits down. The House of Commons erupts, not in applause, in argument, in anger, in the painful process of accepting what Churchill just said. For 200 years, Britain has been the dominant power, the empire on which the sun never sets, the Royal Navy ruling the waves, British diplomacy shaping world affairs. Now Churchill just told Parliament that Britain's contribution to winning this war is secondary, that American power is what's going to finish Germany, that Britain's role is important but supporting. It's true. Everyone in that chamber knows it's true. But hearing it said out loud by the Prime Minister in the House of Commons makes it real in a way it wasn't before. This is the price of Montgomery's ego. Not just the apology, not just returning First Army. This, Churchill, having to publicly humble Britain to repair the damage. In his office at Versailles, Eisenhower reads the transcript of Churchill's speech. He feels no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just profound sadness. Churchill shouldn't have had to say that. Britain has fought magnificently. British soldiers have died by the hundreds of thousands. The country has endured 6 years of total war. They deserve better than having their Prime Minister admit they're playing a supporting role. But Montgomery made this necessary. Montgomery's pride forced Churchill's humiliation. Segment 4. The Gamble. Eisenhower sets the transcript aside, picks up a different document. Operational plans for the Rhine crossing. Montgomery's plans. Operation Plunder. He starts reading, slowly, carefully, looking for the flaws he suspects are there. The plan is everything you'd expect from Montgomery. Meticulous, detailed, absolutely massive in scale. 300,000 troops, British, Canadian and American. 9th Army providing the southern thrust, 3,500 artillery pieces, a 4-hour preliminary bombardment, 2 airborne divisions, 17,000 paratroopers, engineers prepared to construct bridges under fire, logistics units staged to push supplies across the river the moment a bridgehead is established. It's impressive, overwhelming, the kind of set-piece operation that Montgomery excels at.
It's also going to take 2 months to prepare. 2 months of stockpiling ammunition, moving units into position, conducting rehearsals, building the invasion fleet, coordinating air support. Montgomery's philosophy in action: don't attack until everything is perfect. Accept delay in exchange for certainty. Assault date, March 23rd, nearly 2 months away. Eisenhower thinks about Patton, thinks about Third Army's philosophy: speed over preparation, audacity over certainty.
Attack before the enemy is ready, even if you're not quite ready yourself. 2 completely different approaches to warfare. Montgomery's way has worked. El Alamein, Sicily, Normandy. When Montgomery has time to prepare, he usually succeeds. But Market Garden failed, and Montgomery had time to prepare for that too. Eisenhower closes the folder. He's made his decision. Montgomery gets his Rhine crossing, gets 9th Army for one operation, gets the chance to prove that meticulous preparation delivers results. But Eisenhower is also thinking about what Patton said: I'll cross the Rhine before Montgomery even starts his engines. If Patton does that, if Third Army crosses the Rhine while Montgomery is still preparing, it proves something important. Proves that Montgomery's way isn't the only way, maybe isn't even the best way. And if Montgomery fails, if Operation Plunder becomes Market Garden all over again, Eisenhower will have justification to remove him permanently.
The gamble is this: give Montgomery enough rope to either vindicate himself or hang himself. Eisenhower picks up the phone, calls Bradley. Omar, I've reviewed Montgomery's plans for the Rhine crossing. And? March 23rd, 2 months from now. Bradley is quiet. Patton could cross in 2 weeks if he saw an opportunity. I know, that's exactly what I'm counting on. Act 3. Patton strikes first. March 22nd, 1945, 2200 hours. Patton is studying maps at Third Army headquarters. His forces have been advancing steadily through Germany. The Rhine is close now, just a few miles ahead. One of his intelligence officers brings news. The Germans are defending the Rhine heavily at major crossing points: Mainz, Mannheim, Karlsruhe, all fortified, all covered by artillery and prepared positions. But Oppenheim is different. Oppenheim is a small town, not strategically significant. The Germans have minimal forces there. Maybe they think nobody would try to cross at such an unimportant location. Patton looks at the map, looks at Oppenheim, smiles. That's where we're going. Sir, we don't have bridging equipment staged there. We don't have assault boats in position. We'd need at least 2 days to... We'd need darkness and courage, both of which we have in abundance. Patton issues orders. 5th Infantry Division moves toward Oppenheim immediately. Engineers scramble to gather whatever boats they can find. Artillery repositions to provide covering fire. There's no grand plan, no 2-month preparation, no 3,500 artillery pieces. Just Patton seeing an opportunity and taking it before it disappears. At 22:30 hours, the first assault boats hit the water. Infantry from the 5th Division paddle across in darkness. The Rhine is 400 meters wide at this point. German fire is sporadic, confused. The defenders weren't expecting an attack here. By midnight, elements of the 5th Division are on the east bank, expanding the bridgehead, bringing up reinforcements. By 0600 on March 23rd, Patton has 2 regiments across. Engineers are constructing a pontoon bridge. The crossing is a fact. Patton gets on the phone to Bradley. Omar, we're across the Rhine at Oppenheim. Tell the press. I want the whole world to know Third Army crossed before Montgomery even starts his operation. Bradley allows himself a smile. How many casualties, George? 34 dead so far. Might go up as we expand the bridgehead, but right now, 34. 34 for crossing the Rhine. One night, Omar. One night with whatever boats we could scrounge. No massive preparation, no elaborate planning. Just soldiers who saw a river and decided it wasn't going to stop them. Twist number 5. Patton proves Montgomery unnecessary. The news reaches Eisenhower within hours. He reads the initial report. 5th Division across the Rhine at Oppenheim. Casualties, 34 dead. Bridgehead expanding. 34 casualties. For crossing the Rhine. the river that's supposed to be Germany's final defensive barrier. Eisenhower thinks about Montgomery's plan. 2 months of preparation, 3,500 guns, 17,000 paratroopers, all that effort to guarantee success, and Patton just did it in one night with assault boats and audacity. He picks up the phone, calls Patton directly. "George, I'm reading your report. 34 casualties?" "So far, sir. We're still expanding the bridgehead, but yes, as of now, 34. "How long did you prepare for this crossing?" "About 4 hours. Saw the opportunity at 10 last night. Started crossing at 10:30. We'll have the pontoon bridge complete by this afternoon." Eisenhower laughs. Actually laughs. The tension of the past 2 months breaks for a moment. "You just proved something important, George."
That Montgomery's way isn't the only way?
That sometimes speed and boldness achieve what caution and preparation cannot. You crossed the Rhine with minimal planning, minimal casualties, and maximum effect. That matters. Should I send Montgomery a telegram? Crossed the Rhine last night? Stop. Didn't need 2 months? Stop. Don't push it, George. But yes, make sure the press knows. Third Army deserves recognition for this. Montgomery hears about Patton's crossing within hours. His reaction is predictable. Typical American recklessness. Patton got lucky. The Germans were weak at Oppenheim. If they'd been strong, that crossing would have been a massacre. His staff doesn't argue. But they're thinking what everyone else is thinking. Patton saw weakness and exploited it. That's not luck. That's generalship. And now, Operation Plunder, scheduled for tonight, is going to be compared to Patton's crossing. Everything Montgomery does will be measured against the standard of Patton did this in one night with 34 casualties. Montgomery's perfect operation. March 23rd, 1945. 2100 hours. Operation Plunder begins. 3,500 artillery pieces open fire simultaneously. The bombardment is incredible, deafening. The kind of fire support that leaves nothing alive in the impact zone. For 4 hours, shells fall on German positions along the Rhine. Bunkers collapse, trenches cave in, communication lines shred. At 0100 on March 24th, the assault boats launch. British forces cross in the north, Canadian forces in the center, 9th Army, Simpson's Americans, in the south. The crossing is opposed. German machine guns open up from positions the artillery missed. Mortars drop shells among the boats. Men die in the water, in the boats, on the beaches. But the weight of force is overwhelming. Montgomery brought everything. More troops than the Germans can handle.
More guns than they can answer. More boats than they can sink.
By dawn, the bridgehead is secure. British, Canadian, and American forces are across the Rhine in strength. Engineers are building bridges. The airborne divisions drop behind German lines and seize their objectives. Operation Plunder is a success. Textbook execution. Everything went according to plan. Final casualties, over 500 dead, 3 times that many wounded. Montgomery declares complete victory. Perfect execution of a perfectly planned operation. The northern route into Germany is open. He's right. It is a victory. The Rhine has been crossed. The bridgehead is solid. German defenses are broken. But Patton crossed with 34 dead. Montgomery crossed with 500. Patton prepared for 4 hours. Montgomery prepared for 2 months. Patton used assault boats and surprise. Montgomery used 3,500 guns and 2 airborne divisions. Both crossed successfully. Both achieved their objectives, but one did it faster, cheaper, and with a fraction of the casualties. The American press notices immediately. Patton crosses Rhine in one night. Montgomery takes 2 months. Third Army's quick crossing outshines British set-piece operation. Rhine barrier broken. Patton did it first. Did it better. Montgomery reads the newspapers. His face doesn't change, but something inside him hardens. This was supposed to be his triumph, his vindication, proof that proper planning delivers results. Instead, he's being compared unfavorably to Patton. The newspapers are treating Operation Plunder like it's excessive, wasteful, as if caution is a flaw rather than a virtue. Montgomery tries to keep 9th Army. March 28th, 1945. Montgomery sends a formal request to Eisenhower. Keep Ninth Army for the Ruhr encirclement. The operation is already underway. Transferring the army in the middle of active operations would create confusion and risk operational failure. Eisenhower reads the request, feels a familiar frustration building. This is exactly what Bradley warned about. Montgomery finding operational reasons to extend a limited assignment into permanent command, finding justifications to keep American forces indefinitely. Twist number 6. Eisenhower remembers Market Garden. Eisenhower sits back in his chair, thinks about September 1944, Operation Market Garden. Montgomery's plan to end the war by Christmas. Eisenhower gave him priority, gave him supplies, gave him air support, gave him everything Montgomery requested. The operation failed catastrophically. 17,000 casualties. The bridge at Arnhem stayed in German hands. The war didn't end by Christmas. Montgomery's response, 90% successful. No acknowledgement of failure, no acceptance of responsibility, just an immediate pivot to the next operation that required priority and resources. Now, 5 months later, Montgomery is doing it again. Operation Plunder succeeded, so immediately there's another operation that supposedly requires keeping Ninth Army. And after the Ruhr, there will be another, and another. Always one more operation that justifies maintaining the current command structure. Eisenhower picks up the phone, calls Bradley. Omar, Montgomery wants to keep Ninth Army for the Ruhr encirclement. Of course he does. I've been expecting this since January. Did you really think he'd give up Ninth Army willingly? I expected him to honor our agreement. The Rhine crossing is complete. Ninth Army returns. That was the deal. Ike, Montgomery doesn't see agreements, he sees suggestions. He'll find operational justifications to keep Ninth Army until the war ends, unless you stop him. You have to decide. Do you keep your word to me, or do you let Montgomery walk all over you again? Bradley's voice is calm, but there's steel underneath. I'm stopping him, Eisenhower says. Ninth Army returns to your command, effective April 4th, 1 week from now. Are you sure? Churchill is going to call. Montgomery is going to protest. The British press is going to claim you're undermining Allied unity. I'm sure. I gave you my word in January. First Army returns immediately. Ninth Army returns after the Rhine. The Rhine crossing is complete. Ninth Army comes back. Thank you, Ike. I wasn't certain you'd follow through. I always follow through, Omar. Montgomery is about to learn that. Final confrontation. April 1st, 1945. Eisenhower calls Montgomery to Supreme Headquarters. Face to face. No intermediaries. Montgomery arrives at 1400 hours. Formal, correct, expecting negotiation. He doesn't get negotiation. Ninth Army returns to General Bradley's command on April 4th. The transfer is final and non-negotiable. Montgomery's face hardens. The Ruhr encirclement requires unity of command. Splitting forces in the middle of an operation is militarily unsound. The operation will continue with appropriate coordination between army groups. Ninth Army will work with 21st Army Group as needed, but it returns to American command. This decision prioritizes politics over operational effectiveness. Eisenhower's voice drops, gets quieter, more dangerous. This decision honors the agreement we made in January. I told you Ninth Army was yours for the Rhine crossing. I told you it returns afterward. The Rhine crossing is complete. Ninth Army returns. This isn't politics. This is me keeping my word. I must protest in the strongest possible. Your protest is noted and overruled. Ninth Army transfers to 12th Army Group on April 4th. This conversation is over. Montgomery stands, rigid, furious. You're making a mistake, General. I'm keeping my promise, Field Marshal. There's a difference. Montgomery leaves without saluting. Within an hour, he's on the phone to Churchill. Explains that Eisenhower is making a military mistake for political reasons. The Ruhr encirclement will be compromised. British influence over Allied strategy will end. Churchill listens, then delivers the final verdict. Bernard, I cannot intervene. The political cost is too high. You had your Rhine crossing. You had American support for that operation. The Americans want their army back, and I cannot tell them no. But Prime Minister, the war is ending, Bernard. Germany is finished. The only question is whether we finish them as allies or as rivals bickering over command structure. I choose allies. 9th Army returns to American command. That's final. Churchill hangs up. Twist number 7. Montgomery loses everything. April 4th, 1945, evening.
Montgomery sits alone in his headquarters. The room is cold despite the fire burning in the fireplace. Maps cover the walls. Northern Germany, the Netherlands, the advance routes his 21st Army Group will take in the final weeks of the war. But 9th Army isn't on those maps anymore. 300,000 American soldiers removed from his command with the stroke of Eisenhower's pen. He stares at the operational plan for the Ruhr encirclement. It assumed 9th Army would remain, assumed unity of command, assumed his arguments about operational necessity would prevail. They didn't. For the first time in his career, Montgomery understands what's happened, not tactically, not operationally, but strategically. He's lost. Not because Eisenhower outmaneuvered him, not because Bradley was more politically savvy. He lost because he broke something fundamental in January. Trust, respect, the unspoken agreement that allies don't humiliate each other in public. The American soldiers who died in the Ardennes, he tried to claim credit for their sacrifice. Tried to make their deaths about British leadership saving American disorganization. And the Americans never forgot, never forgave. He thinks about the press conference. 15 minutes, that's all it took. 15 minutes of believing his own narrative, of needing the world to know that Britain still mattered, that British generals still shaped victories. 15 minutes that cost him everything. Churchill won't intervene again. Can't intervene. Britain is exhausted. 380,000 British dead. The country is fighting on fumes and pride. Montgomery stands, walks to the map, traces the advance routes with one finger. His forces will liberate Holland, will accept German surrender in their sector. Important work, vital work. But he won't command American armies, won't lead the great offensive, won't be at the center of the victory. He'll be supporting. Exactly what Churchill admitted to Parliament. Exactly what Montgomery couldn't accept. The warrior who believed meticulous planning guaranteed success just learned that some battles aren't won with preparation. Some battles are lost the moment you forget that alliances require humility. He returns to his desk, begins revising operational plans. Plans that now account for British and Canadian forces only. The maps on the wall still show 9th Army's old positions. Montgomery doesn't take them down. Leaving them up feels like admitting defeat. But defeat is already here, has been here since January 7th, when he stood before reporters and chose ego over alliance. The rest is just paperwork. Act 4. 2 Paths to Victory. April 25, 1945. 9th Army, under American command, reaches the Elbe River. They make contact with Soviet forces advancing from the east. The meeting at the Elbe is one of the war's iconic moments. American and Soviet soldiers shaking hands on the banks of the river. The two great powers that defeated Germany meeting in the heart of Europe. 9th Army is there, the army Montgomery wanted to keep, playing a central role in the final victory under American command. General Simpson handles the coordination with Soviet forces professionally, efficiently, without drama. Bradley watches from 12th Army Group headquarters. This is vindication. 9th Army didn't need Montgomery. American forces, under American leadership, finished the job. Meanwhile, Montgomery's 21st Army Group is liberating Holland and northern Germany. The operations are successful. German forces in Montgomery's sector surrender on May 4th, 3 days before the general German surrender. Montgomery accepts the surrender personally. It's a significant moment, a British field marshal accepting the capitulation of German forces. But he's not at the Elbe, not meeting the Soviets, not at the center of the historical moment that ends the war in Europe. That honor belongs to American forces, the same forces Montgomery wanted to command. The lesson. 4 legacies. May 8, 1945. VE Day. Victory in Europe. The war that started in 1939 is finally over. 4 men sit in different places, thinking about the journey that brought them here. Montgomery sits at his headquarters in northern Germany, newly elevated to Viscount Montgomery of Alamein. El Alamein and Normandy have secured his place in history. In the years ahead, he'll write memoirs defending every decision. The press conference in January? A misunderstanding. The Americans were disorganized. He did save them. History, he believes, will vindicate him. It won't. He'll die in 1976, still convinced of his brilliance, still unable to see that sometimes perfection is the enemy of good. His legacy will be complex. A brilliant tactician whose ego undermined his strategic judgment. A general who won battles but lost the respect of allies. At 12th Army Group headquarters, Bradley reflects on the men who fell in the Ardennes. For him, January 1945 was never about command politics, it was about honoring the dead. Ensuring their families knew they died fighting bravely, not being rescued. He'll become the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1949, serving with distinction. But he'll never forget having to fight his own allies to protect the dignity of American sacrifice. He'll never forget that some battles are fought not on battlefields, but in headquarters. Not against enemies, but against friends who forget what matters. Patton's mind, somewhere in Czechoslovakia with 3rd Army, returns to Bastogne. To the 90-degree turn in a blizzard, to crossing the Rhine in one night while Montgomery took 2 months. He proved that audacity matters, that sometimes you attack before you're ready, because waiting means losing the opportunity. That the warrior spirit can accomplish what meticulous planning cannot. 7 months from now, in December 1945, a car accident will end his life. One of history's great warriors killed by peacetime traffic. His reported last words, that he was no longer needed now that the war was over. He was wrong. His legacy would endure, not just in victories, but in the philosophy he embodied, that boldness has a place in warfare, that sometimes the best plan is to attack now, not to wait for the perfect moment that never comes. Eisenhower, alone at Supreme Headquarters, returns to the question that haunted him on January 8th. Fire Montgomery and destroy the alliance, or compromise and save it. He chose compromise, chose to wound pride rather than break partnerships. Was it right? History will argue endlessly. Some will say he should have fired Montgomery immediately, that insulting troops demands immediate consequences, that maintaining discipline requires decisive action. Others will say the compromise was brilliant, that holding the alliance together mattered more than punishing one man's ego, that winning the war required accepting imperfect solutions. Eisenhower knows only this: the alliance held, Germany surrendered. The war ended with Britain and America still partners, however strained that partnership became. He'll become President of the United States in 1953, will serve 2 terms, will be remembered not for winning battles, but for holding people together long enough to win the war. In his memoirs, he'll write, "The ability to command is the ability to choose between bad options and worse ones, between solutions that satisfy no one but keep everyone in the fight. Leadership isn't about making everyone happy, it's about making the decisions that prevent total failure." That's what January 1945 taught him. You can't always win. Sometimes you just have to prevent losing everything. Closing. The weight of command. We return one final time to Eisenhower's office. Not January 8th anymore, May 8th, 1945. V.E. Day. The war in Europe is over. Eisenhower sits at the same desk where he spent that long night deciding Montgomery's fate. The ashtray is empty now, no more cigarettes, no more late-night calculations about which relationship to wound, which alliance to save. On his desk, 3 letters. One from Bradley, warm, personal. "You kept your word about 9th Army. That mattered more than you know. Thank you for standing with us when it counted." One telegram from Patton, brief, typical George. "We won. Your way worked. Still think mine was faster, but you kept the team together, and that's what mattered. Well done, Ike." One formal note from Montgomery, distant, proper. "Congratulations on the successful conclusion of the campaign. 21st Army Group performed its duties with distinction." No mention of January, no acknowledgement of the crisis. As if it never happened. Eisenhower sets them aside. He thinks about the night of January 8th, the draft termination order, the telephone call from Churchill, the impossible choice between firing Montgomery and losing Bradley. He chose neither. Chose instead the harder path, the compromise that satisfied no one but kept everyone fighting. The cost was real. Bradley never fully trusted him the same way again. Montgomery resented him until the end. Patton died thinking Eisenhower was too political, too cautious. Churchill had to humble Britain publicly to repair the damage. But the mission succeeded. The alliance held. Germany surrendered. Was it worth it? Eisenhower picks up his pen, begins writing his final report as Supreme Allied Commander. Coalition warfare requires accepting that perfect solutions don't exist. Every decision creates winners and losers. Holding an alliance together sometimes means disappointing everyone equally. He pauses, crosses it out. Too philosophical for a military report. He tries again. In January 1945, a command crisis threatened Allied unity. It was resolved through compromise and clear boundaries. First Army returned to American command immediately. Ninth Army returned after the Rhine crossing, as agreed. The alliance held. The mission succeeded. Better, factual. Doesn't capture the weight of those decisions, but facts are all history needs. The personal cost, the friendships strained, the lonely nights calculating futures that all ended badly, those don't belong in official reports. Eisenhower signs the document, files it away. Outside, Europe celebrates. Inside, one man sits quietly with the knowledge that sometimes winning means everyone loses a little. That's the price of holding people together long enough to finish what they started. He stands, walks to the window, looks out at Versailles. The palace that hosted the treaty ending the First World War watched the command that ended the Second. Eisenhower thinks about all the decisions, all the compromises, all the nights wondering if he was making the right choice or just the least destructive one. He kept his promises, kept the alliance together, kept everyone fighting when it would have been easier to let it all fall apart. That has to be enough, because in the end, leadership isn't measured by who loved you. It's measured by whether the mission succeeded despite everyone wanting different things. The alliance held, the war ended, the mission succeeded, and tonight, for the first time in 6 years, it's work without wondering if tomorrow the alliance collapses. Tonight, the war is over. Eisenhower turns from the window. There's still work to do. Occupation planning, demobilization, bringing millions of soldiers home. But tonight, he allows himself one moment of satisfaction. He made the hard choices, took the heat, kept the team together when it wanted to tear itself apart. That's what leaders do. Not the easy thing, not the popular thing, the necessary thing. And sometimes, that's enough. The lights of Versailles shine in the darkness. The war is over. The alliance survived. Mission accomplished.